Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. We've had a bit of a turnaround, a bit of an admission, if you will, from Humza. For many years now, he's been saying that an independent Scotland would have free and open trade across the border with the United Kingdom. He said, no, we could have agreements there, it would be fine, things would go north, things would go south, and all this rubbish. He seems to forget that he's got no say on the matter. It's entirely up to the Westminster government whether they want to impose border checks or not. He may wish not to, but it isn't within his power. But now he's come clean. He said there will have to be border checks. However, he's put more of his spin on it to say, oh yes, there'll be lots of border checks, but don't worry, it won't affect anything. We'll do all the paperwork. Are you suggesting that the Westminster government won't do paperwork of their own? The fact is, he hasn't got a clue what he's talking about, and for years they've been lying about the free movement of trade, and now they've been caught out and having to admit, yes, there will be checks, there will be bureaucracy, there will be delays, and there will be costs. Finally admitting what we have all known for a long time: an independent Scotland cannot have free passage, and especially if it's seeking to join the EU. At that point, you're going to need a hard border. They really haven't got a clue, but it is at least nice to see they're finally admitting it. Here goes. You know, when reality hits these people, it really does hit them with quite a thump, doesn't it? But they have been denying reality for so long, and now finally reality's caught up with them. And they don't like it, of course. They absolutely don't like it. But they are trying to put a gloss on it, a spin on it, to try and make it out to be still better than it's going to be. But it is going to be pretty bad. So Humza confirms, finally, that the Skexit border checks will happen, but he insists the Scottish government will handle them, as he denies Brexit comparison. Now, why does he think that these checks are only going to be done on the Scottish side of it, as it were? Why does he assume that the Westminster government won't say, well, actually, we want to make sure on our side that what's coming in is correct. Let's do our checks. Let's make sure you've got your passport, because we don't just want to let any old person in. We must have border control. You've got your visa, obviously, because we haven't entered any Schengen agreement type thing with you. It's not like the south of Ireland where there's been an agreement that's historical. You are a brand new country. There are no historical accesses like that. Let's see all the necessary paperwork. Your imports. Have you paid your import duty? They can do anything they like. It's, the UK. It's not Scotland. Scotland can do what they want. They're their own independent country. They don't want to impose these things. That's up to them. But they can't say that the UK can't impose them. Reality sucks, doesn't it? Anyway, the First Minister, appearing on the leading podcast with former Labour spin doctor Alistair Campbell and ex-Tory Minister Rory Stewart, was compared to Nigel Farage over his independence claims. Can you imagine two people more diametrically different, and yet they're being compared? There they are, look at them. Three wise monkeys. Dumb as hell, aren't they? Anyway, Humza confessed that the independent Scotland would, finally confessed it he has, would have border checks for goods, but insisted that these will be no problem, as the Scottish government will handle most of the paperwork. He lives in a fantasy land. And why does he think it's only a check for goods and not a check for people? You can't just let anyone through the border, you know. You don't know who these people are. They may not even be Scottish independent people. What's the word? Scottish citizens. They can be there on holiday. You don't know. So let's see your passport. Anyway, the First Minister is enjoying his time in the limelight as he took part in the leading podcast from former Labour spin doctor Alistair Campbell and ex-Tory Minister Rory Stewart. He was quizzed about his ambitions to break up the UK, with one of his comments even likened to Nigel Farage. Now, of course, it's all rubbish, because none of this is ever going to come to pass, is it? You're never going to have an independent Scotland, because the Scots generally aren't stupid enough to allow it to happen. So it is just a fun exercise in looking at how dumb these people are and how naive they are when they think that other countries won't impose their rules on Scotland. Bonkers. Anyway, as part of the taxpayer-funded independence prospectuses published by the Scottish Government, officials admit there would be checks at the border between England and Scotland if the latter joins the EU. I would suggest regardless of whether the latter joins the EU. Doesn't matter. England could just go, no, you're an independent country. Border. This would be adding red tape which doesn't currently exist. The EU paper says there will be food sampling to protect human health or customs and excise checks on alcohol to ensure that correct duties have been paid and that products are genuine. And the officials add, though checks like these and other systems such as spot checks, we would ensure that the integrity of the European single market is maintained to protect consumers, confirm animal health and food safety, and ensure fair taxation. Well, that's fine, but why wouldn't the rest of the UK impose that the very day Scotland became independent, even before they joined the EU? He has no say over this. Well, they could. They could just say, no, we want to see passports now. You're a foreign country. You haven't got a visa. You're not in the visa waiver scheme, so you're going to have to put your passport over. That's international law. Anyway, this is the first time Mr. Yousaf has admitted to himself that there will be added issues for Scots and businesses if Skexit ever happens. And all you've got to say is, thank God it ain't. However, he claimed that the Scottish Government would deal with most of this red tape, despite its reputation as incompetent when it comes to policy and legislation. The Scottish Government? Incompetent? No, never. I refuse to believe it. The First Minister said there would be light touch customs checks on goods passing between England and Scotland after independence. Maybe from England to Scotland, but not necessarily the other way. He said, our paper on the EU doesn't pretend that there's not going to have to be some kind of light touch customs checks for some goods coming across the border between England and Scotland. The prize, of course, he says, is that we in Scotland would then be part of a single market that's 7 times the size of the UK. You would not be. You'd be leaving a single market, which is already large, to join one which you think is large, but would still exclude you because you're not going to join the EU. So you're actually leaving all markets to go independent. No access to the EU, no access to the United Kingdom. And there's nothing stopping the UK saying, well, we'll impose a 20% tariff on Scottish goods going into England. They could, and what can you do about it? This is the lack of thought these people have. Anyway, Mr. Stewart, who was a leading Remainer, claimed that this echoed the language used by Brexiteers during debates on Britain's departure from the EU. He said, when we hear the phrase light touch customs checks, all the alarm bells ring because that's what Brexiteers always said as well. His colleague, Mr. Campbell, then added that Brexit had made Mr. Yousaf's job harder due to people being aware of the problems posed by new barriers to trade. He says, there's a touch of the Farage about this, saying, this is what's going to happen. You're basically saying, you're giving us the end point in terms of your communication without actually, fair enough, admitting that there are problems. But it seems to me that people now have a sense of what those problems are. Of course, the biggest problem with any of this is the SNP and Humza Yousaf. The SNP are incompetent and he is a moron. And if you think any of that is ever going to push towards independence, you're very naive. The First Minister replied with, how dare you, before claiming that the EU would allow them to join quicker as Scotland was a member under the United Kingdom. No, they won't, because the moment you become an independent nation, you're not under the United Kingdom, and the UK is not a member. You would be going in as an independent state. And Spain will say no. He says, we're not going into the EU completely cold. Yes, you are. We have, of course, been a member of the EU for many, many decades. No, you haven't. Scotland has never, ever been a member of the EU. In the same way that England has never been a member of the EU. There is no England in the EU. There is no Scotland in the EU. The EU was the United Kingdom. You have now left that. You, assuming you get independence, you have now left the United Kingdom. You're Scotland. You've never been in the EU. He says, now I accept there's got to be an application process, which will take forever. Do I think the application process, would Europe look to speed things up? And we would be able to speed that up? He says, I certainly hope so. Yes, hope. Hope gets so little done, though, doesn't it? Actually doing things gets things done. And one of the things that Spain will do is say no, because they have a problem with Catalan. And so Spain say no, and you're done. And there you are. You're outside the EU. You're outside the UK. You've got to pay your tariffs to buy and sell into the EU. You're going to have to pay your tariffs to buy and sell into the UK. What are you going to do? And that is why the majority of Scots say, on your bike, laddie. Coming up. Answer me this. Imagine some weird technical future, an alternative universe perhaps, where somehow the SNP managed to win the referendum and they do go ahead and they say, right, we're going to have an independent Scotland. And so, you know, the rest of the United Kingdom say, fine, okay, you're an independent Scotland. As of tonight, midnight, you're independent. And they cut all funding immediately. Bang, that's it, done. And then they wake up tomorrow morning and find that overnight the army have been out in force and have put a huge fence right up across the Scottish border. A couple of checkpoints, one in Carlisle, you know, the Carlisle route, one in Berwick. And they say, no, you can come in, but you have to have a passport and your visa. Immediately, passport and visa. There's nothing stopping the UK from doing that. And there is nothing that Scotland can do. It's not their government. It's not their land. It's not their country. They have no say at all. And they say, well, that's not fair. It's not, well, no, you want it to be an independent country. There you go. Off you go. Independ. You know. Do what you do. Do what you must do. We don't care. That's it. Boom. Done. Finished. Well, obviously, they'll run out of money within days. They'll start printing their own money, the Scottish pound. They get their thing up, you know, and it'll be there. And they release it. Hey, day one. Same value as a pound. One Scottish pound equals one English pound. One British pound. And they go, okay, that's fine. By day 2, it's worth about 8p. By day 3, you need 10,000 Scottish pounds to buy a toffee. It will fall that fast on the stock market because there's nothing backing it up. They've got no trade agreements with any other country. They've got no passport agreements. They've got no free trade. There's no credit rating. They haven't got their stock market. Nobody's going to recognise their central bank day one. All these agreements have to be put in. These people don't know how to do this. Then they're going to have their embassies. They're going to have, but not in the UK embassies. They'll have to go and pay for their own embassies and the embassy staff. They're going to have to do all this. They've got all the expense of running this. They've only got 5.5 million people. You know, by the time you take off the million they're retired and the million at school, you've got 3.5 million people, but they've all got their day jobs. Who the hell's going to run the country? Who's going to pay for running the country? And so, within months, they'll be knocking at the gate saying, please, 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 take us back. And it'll be Darien 2.0. Only this time, the United Kingdom government can say, right, we'll come back, but here's the rules. And boy, will they be strict. And so ultimately, it would be even worse. But you see, you can't tell people that. Well, you can tell them, but your average SNP voter, too thick to understand. They don't understand how fragile Scotland would be outside of free trade of the United Kingdom and definitely outside of the trade agreements with the EU and the rest of the world, of which it currently enjoys as being part of the United Kingdom. Simple, isn't it? They literally haven't got a clue. Only now, slowly, with the admission that there would be border checks, they're starting to get that little inkling that independence could never happen. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, leave a like, leave a comment, please share the video, and let's make sure that these idiots are always highlighted for being the fools that they are. Bye.